was born in Jakarta, in Indonesia, and then I studied music in Royal Conservatory of Den Haag in Holland. But then in 1998 I moved to Spain, to this house exactly, and here, this is where my activities are based. So I practice, prepare for the concerts, write music, compose, and not only that, but I do many things such as, of course, working with other musicians, working with composers. I also compose music for disabled children here, and those kind of things helped me a lot, inspired me, of course, and I learned a lot from them, and I want to apply it in Indonesia, where I founded the Indonesian Classical Music Foundation, and at the moment we work with underprivileged children in Jakarta, but we hope to have a bigger scale and work with underprivileged children outside Jakarta too, so everywhere around Indonesia. And well, basically my activities are centered both in Spain and Indonesia, but I also travel sometimes to Holland, to many countries in Europe, to the Americas and Australia.
Today we are here with Ananda Sukarlan, and it's a privilege to have him here to talk about music and so many other things, and I hope you get to know him better with this video. So Ananda, you said that you were born in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So how was it that you started studying classical music in Indonesia?
It was because when I was small, there was a friend of our family. They were Dutch and they wanted to go back to Holland, and they left several things to our house, including a very old piano, an upright piano, and some, of course at the time no compact disc, but how do you call it? Vinyls. Vinyls, yes. This music I remember by Rachmaninoff, by Mozart. And so I listened to those vinyls and of course played on the piano. I was about 4 at the time, 4 or 5. And then I made so much noise on the piano, and my parents said, well, I think you better learn properly the piano, because it could sound nice. So that's how it began.
So this family, Dutch family you said,
Yeah.
has any connection with the fact that you went to Holland later on to study?
No, after that we lose contact.
Yeah.
We lose contact once they left to Holland.
So how did you end up in Holland?
In Holland, because when I was 17, after I graduated from high school, I applied, of course, to Holland, and I got a scholarship from the Dutch government. I applied to several countries, but since Indonesia and Holland had that kind of governmental collaboration relationship, they gave me a scholarship. But then in the 5th year, so I had graduated in fact, but then in the postgraduate program, they cut my scholarship. They cut my scholarship in the last year of my graduate program. So I had to manage, I worked, and then I graduated, that was in 1993, and then I thought, well, since I'm here, I should just do the postgraduate studies. And so I studied until 1995. So that's
in Holland.
In Holland, yeah.
So you became a pianist, a professional pianist.
Yes.
And then, how is it that you end up, because you mentioned before that you are based in Spain.
Yes.
How did you end up in Spain?
At that time, I knew a Spanish girl who became my girlfriend, and now becomes my wife. And well, at that time we still lived in Holland, because at the time I was in the beginning of my career. I joined piano competitions, for example. I joined already piano competitions when I was in the conservatory in Den Haag. But then, so we came back and forth, but then things got too difficult, because she's Spanish and she needs to work here. She needed to work here in Spain. And so, having a kind of long-distance relationship and everything, and then she was pregnant and everything. So I thought, okay, then I moved my base to Spain. And then a few years later, I left Holland completely. I still go there once in a while, but I don't have an apartment anymore there.
Mm-hmm. So then you came to Spain, and from being a pianist, let's say an instrumentalist, you ended up becoming a composer, and actually a very active composer.
Yes. I started to compose when I was in the conservatory, in fact. But I always say that my career went a bit too well for, in the piano side. I concertized a lot, I performed a lot, and when you're a pianist or when you're a performer in any instrument, it's difficult to compose because music from other people were stuck in your head, and so every time you write something, another person's music will creep up in the music paper. So little by little, I reduced my activity as a performer, and so I could compose more and more. And now I can say that maybe my activity now is 70% composer and 30%.
70% composing?
70, even almost 80.
Almost 80%.
I want to be 100% composer, but
you want to be 100%?
Yes, but it's still...
Because now you are into, let's say, a project of composing music for disabled people.
Yes, disabled people. So, I have to relearn what I have done, because, now I have to write music for left hand alone, for example. I have to write music for a child without legs, so you don't use the pedals of the piano. And also the instrument which you can use only with one hand is in fact the French horn, because the other hand is just to hold it. So in fact you can play it with one hand. But it's impossible to write for one hand for violin or cello. Well, cello, you can have a few fingers on the right hand just to hold the bow, also the violin. But the other instruments are a bit too difficult. Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about this activity? I mean, composing for disabled people, and also how it changes. Do you have a foundation in Indonesia?
Yes.
You want to help underprivileged
yes.
children. So can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, underprivileged children, because it's a kind of reflection of when I was young. My parents couldn't pay for my studies in Holland. And even my parents told me that, life as a musician is not as nice as life as a, medical doctor or lawyer or whatever. But at that time, it's not because I was a very positive person or I was optimistic or whatever. I was just stupid. I thought, well, I love music and I want to live. I want to work in a job, and I have to love my job. Otherwise, why do you have to live? I mean, a job is not only for earning money, but it's part of your living. And in fact, that's the only thing I can do in life: music. I know nothing about law. I know nothing about politics until now. So basically, it's because of limitation that I studied music and I work in music now. And I'm happy, and I feel that I have done the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you think is the role of music in the society?
It's so much, and if you don't believe me, you just live without music for just 3 days. Turn off everything, don't listen to, not even on television or whatever. And you'll realize that your mood starts to get worse. Your quality of life starts to get worse. But the thing is, we don't notice it because now listening to music is just pressing the play button or, in the computer. So it's very underestimated. But as I told you, just try to live without music at all for 3 days and you'll understand. We can't talk about this because you think, why, We can't live without oxygen, we can't live without food, but also we can't live with music because it's part of our existence as a human being, because we have passion. We need music because it's part of our existence as a human being, because we are unlike animals. We love, we don't just have sex. We can love, we communicate, and music is a higher level of communication. You know, Shakespeare said that music is heightened speech, and that's why, you know, we listen to operas. Although with the text that we know, the text of Shakespeare or text of whoever. And even we go to operas because we want to listen to music, because it touches parts of the brain or heart or whatever that other things cannot touch with that. If you think, you go to the opera, you know already the story, you have listened to it many times. Why do you go to operas? There are some things which are so metaphysical that you can't explain with words and music. You just have to experience it, and you can write theses and papers, thousands of pages of papers about music, and there's nothing that can explain music so well that just listening to it, or even playing it, or even better, writing the music.
I understand. Then, talking about music in society, being more precisely what people say or understand as classical music, that you don't like this name, I guess.
Yeah.
And what's the role of classical music that you can explain to us what you understand by classical music?
Yes.
And in this case, in Indonesia, because Indonesia is not a country where classical music is much spread.
No, because classical music is not from Indonesia. It's not even from Asia. It's from Europe. But classical music is something universal. Exactly because maybe you know this theory of Noam Chomsky, the linguist, that there is this monogenesis of human speech. Like, for example, ma. In every language there is this ma, for mother, for mama, whatever. And well, it's the same with music. I mean, music has the same universal language. This octave, and then it's everywhere in the whole world. Even if you do a pentatonic scale, in Balinese it's, in Japanese it's, and in Balinese, as I told you, there's these three notes, which makes the harmony. You see, so it's like, as Chomsky said in linguistics, monogenesis in human speech, there's also in music. So it's universal. And then classical music. Why do we call it classical music? I don't know. But classical music is, of course, not music written by dead composers, because classical music is very much alive until now. If you watch the films of Harry Potter, Star Wars, Jaws, Pirates of Caribbean, whatever, what you listen is classical music, written by a very alive composer. I always propose the term literature music to substitute the term classical music. Literature music means music which is written down. So if you see the music of Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Schumann, John Williams, who writes music for Star Wars and Jurassic Park, my music, it's all written down. But if you listen to jazz music, that's improvised. Every time it's performed, it sounds differently. Also there's the motive. The motive is always the same. Folk music is not written down. It's taught by the parents to the children, to the grandchildren and everything. So that's the difference between this music I play and I write and the music the other kind of music. So it's written down. And then some other people propose the term art music. For me, it's a little bit insulting because art music means the music of Mozart is art, and the music of jazz musician, Czech Korea or wherever, is not art. That's not true, of course. And folk music is the highest art of all for me. So art music is not the right term for this. Serious music, again. So what I'm doing is serious. What the jazz musicians are doing are not serious. Come on, it's not true. So I think the best term for this is literature music. Music which is written down, like this, the notes. You don't have to know the music, you just read and you can play it. Of course now with recordings and everything is different, you can just play, but that's also the same with other music, with folk music. Folk music and jazz, which should have been different every time it's performed, now it can be the same because it's the same record, it's recorded. But even in this music, classical or literature music, it should be different every time it's performed. Because in fact, music as it is, it never exists. Music doesn't exist in this world. It only exists once you play it. My music doesn't exist. The Ninth Symphony of Beethoven doesn't exist. While Mona Lisa of Leonardo da Vinci exists. Sculptures of Michelangelo, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, they all exist because they are there. But music is not there. Music exists where? Nowhere, unless you play it. So, and the only thing to make music sound is either by writing it down, as in classical music, or playing it as in folk or jazz or pop.
So, now that you're talking about writing down music, since you are from Indonesia and in your music you combine, let's say, Indonesian elements of music with the classical, so to say, music, but Indonesian music is not written down.
No.
So how do you manage to write music?
Yes, it's difficult, of course. And even the gamelan ensembles or orchestras in Indonesia are not standardized. So one piece of music which can be played in one ensemble sometimes cannot be played by the other ensemble. That of course creates problems. And well, I just have to invent some notations and I have to use the same instruments all the time. And the other difficulty, of course, is that usually folk musicians, they cannot read music. But in fact, reading music, reading notations like this, is not so difficult. I mean, you can learn it for a few months. What you cannot learn is how to play music. I mean, in expressing the music. But just playing it, just reading and playing it is quite easy. Just give a few months.
Excuse me. And how? What are your goals in the short term and the long term?
The short term for me in Indonesia with my foundation is that as many children as possible can have access to music, good music, whether it's folk music or classical music or whatever. Because in a country where we have a very rich culture, but the government doesn't care about it at all. I mean, I don't know what our government care of, but anyway, but certainly not culture. And this is part of our life. I mean, God gave us left brain and right brain. Every time we work with art, we use the right brain. And if you don't use one part of the brain, then it's unbalanced. We have an unbalanced life. And nowadays, where everything is so digitalized and logical, scientific and everything, we think that those kind of things, artistic things, whatever, is not important. But then why do we have two sides of the brain?
Good question.
Yes, exactly. I mean, God doesn't give us something if we don't use it. And if we don't use it, it will be, really, I think it would be unbalanced.
So then in the short term, your goal, let's say, in Indonesia is to work with children?
With children to activate their right brain. And unfortunately, the right brain has to do with financial situation, because if you want to study music, you have to have a certain financial situation. And the underprivileged children don't have access to it. And of course, as a musician, I only can give music, but they should learn about paintings too and other visual arts. And so I hope the next generation will be better than now, because that the brain is more balanced. It's not that because music is beautiful. Of course, it's beautiful. It's very beautiful, but it's the quality of life. Our quality of life is very much influenced by how we use our brain. That we use it as much as possible.
And in the long term?
In the long term, of course, to be happy, as everybody wants to. But the principle is just, I want to give back what whoever, God, nature, other people, what God has given me in life. I mean, I consider myself someone very lucky. I came from a not very wealthy family. I mean, we could eat, but we are not healthy.
You're wealthy. Wealthy.
Wealthy.
But you said healthy.
Oh, I said healthy. Oh, yeah. Yes, wealthy. My parents had 7 children at the time. My parents were not corruptors. So we had, every time we wanted to buy something, it's always, we negotiate. The piano I had free at home. What happened if I didn't have that piano? And knowing now that I have no other talents, I can only do music, I cannot do anything else. What happened then? And then that I could study in a very good conservatory in Den Haag. Good teachers. Nan Gruber was my teacher, he was Russian. I always think about him all the time. And then my career is not so bad either. And now I can fulfill my dream as a composer. So what else? I mean, I live in a very nice place. I miss Indonesia, Indonesian friends, Indonesian food, but I go there every few months. And I think it's a way of saying thank you. I don't say it too often, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I think thankfulness or gratitude is manifested by action.
And you just mentioned 2 things that I would like to go deep into.
Yeah.
You said you would like to be happy, and you.
I am happy.
You are happy, okay. But in the long term, when I ask you, what would you like in the long term? You said something like to be happy, and then you said also something about you want to compose even more. So, how would you combine this happiness with this composing?
To have a healthy life so that I can compose. I mean, my happiness is in composing. When I'm composing, that's my happiness. And knowing that people would benefit, at least spiritually, from my music, that's happiness also.
And what would you say to, you mentioned before, you are working with children in Indonesia. Let's say this video is seen by or watched by some children, not only in Indonesia, maybe it's anywhere in the world. And what would be your message for them?
Well, especially if those children are in Africa, where even to get water is difficult. But my message is that life is not only about your job, not only about surviving. Surviving is not only physical, I mean, that you have to eat and everything, but spiritually you need that. You need food for your spirit as well. And that makes you a much better person. And if you're a much better person, this world will be a much better world. The world, people who makes the world worse is because they get worse themselves. And one way to make ourselves better is to enrich our spirit. And that can be done through the arts. Not only through music, but any kind of arts. So, try to follow your passion. Be realistic. Maybe your parents want you to become a famous, whatever, singer, pop singer. But if you don't like pop music, then don't. If you don't even like music, don't, because music, sometimes your passion is not in music, but in paintings, or in things like medicine, or in law, everything. But after you exercise, you practice your career, there must always something that enrich you, and that is usually art.
So Ananda, you write Indonesian classical music. What is Indonesian classical music?
Yes. That is the same question asked to, I think, Leonard Bernstein, the great American composer, 50 years ago or whatever, 40 years ago. And before he was asked, he thought about it all the time. And his conclusion was that, the question was, of course, what was American music, American classical music. And his answer, which I agree completely, 100%, is American classical music is music written by American composers. And that is what I think Indonesian classical music too. I mean, my music doesn't sound like gamelan. It has lots of gamelan influence, but it's not gamelan. The instrument is, Western instruments. But then you think about classical music in general. Classical music comes from Europe, unlike pop music comes from United States, you can say, right? But then, as you see, pop music now is around the world. There is, of course, Indonesian pop music, Spanish pop music, everywhere. And I think the point is, classical music, although it originates from Europe, it sounds, it's as I said, part of all of us. And you can hear, for example, music of Leonard Bernstein, music of Alberto Ginastera from Argentina, and then in Australia, Peter Scarford is the great figure there. We composers, we write music because it's inside us. But why is it inside us? Because it's put there by our life, our experiences, by what we hear, by what we see. And in my case, it's a bit complicated because I lived only 17 years, my first 17 years in Indonesia, and then after that I went to Holland, to Europe. So naturally, what is inside me is not purely Indonesian. But then, of course, I can say that the Indonesian element, whatever it is in my music, is because I have nostalgic feeling about Indonesia. And sometimes my music is more Indonesian than, for example, Indonesian pop musicians. Because they want to write music as Western as possible, for example. So it can be also that we write music because we need to hear that music. We need to manifest it. I mean, we hear it in our head, but we want it to sound. And I want to listen to some music which sounds Indonesian. So that's why I think classical music is something universal, and we have to universalize the classical music. We should not think that classical music is from Europe. It's of course it's from Europe, as pop music is from the United States, but classical music belongs to everybody. And I even heard there was a research that if somebody learns to coordinate him or herself reading the notes and play a musical instrument before they were, I think, 6 or 7 years old, it helps a lot in avoiding the Alzheimer disease. That's what I heard. Anyway, the Alzheimer people now, they didn't learn how to read music and play the instrument when they were small. That's what I heard. I don't know how scientific it is, but it's still.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I also I love music and I use music whenever I can in my coaching too. And it's true. The way we process music is different from the way we process language in the brain. And this is something that I think this should be studied to help people. And that's why I think music is not only important for the society, but for us as humans. It's really, really important. We don't realize how important it is.
Yes, exactly. Until we get deprived of it.
Exactly.
Like I told you, just live without music for 3 days and see how your mood becomes.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe one day is okay, but.
What's your process of composition? How you compose a piece? Not just really, let's say, a piece for piano, but an opera, for instance.
Yes, in fact, I don't compose lots for piano. I compose more for human voice. That's my favorite instrument, human voice, because I mean, you take a piano, 2 pianos, and they could sound sort of the same. But you take 2 human beings, and they're never the same, including their expression, including their sense of timing, including their. So each person is an instrument, an individual instrument. So my composition is born, as I told you, because it's inside me. But it's always triggered by something, inspired by something. And I can be inspired by so many things. Paintings, literature. I'm very much inspired by writings of people. The poems of the American Walt Whitman, for example, is for me one of the most inspiring for me. But then also Indonesian poets, people like Sapardi Djoko Damono, Sitor Situmorang, Hasan Aspahani, several of them. But then also, of course, if I write for human voice, the singer itself, himself or herself, inspires me. So even though after I write, then he or she doesn't sing as I would like to, but at least the figure inspires me. So that's why I'm more inspired to write for human voice, because there's somebody, a person who does that to me. And then I always say that a musician, a good musician of course, knows more than the composer. Because the composer knows his music from one point of view. Once I write the music down, I just think the music will sound like this. But then somebody plays it, and he looked at it from a different angle, from a different point of view. And then another person played it, another point of view. And so, they enrich me, those musicians who play my music. And that inspires me a lot for my future music. And if you think that notation means everything, no, notation is just, I don't know, 20–30% of what I want the music to be. Because it's just notes, but you don't have the expression, you don't have the exact timing. I mean, music is not just 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes, it's called rubato in Italian, which means robbing. So you rob the time. So sometimes you go faster, you go slower, and it's just a millisecond that you can write it down. Those kind of things. It goes louder, softer. You cannot just write in every note. This is a bit louder than these notes. No. You just write the notes and you leave so many things to the interpreter. And that's why a composer has the advantage and of course disadvantage than other artists. For example, a painter. A painter communicates directly to his audience. He paints and the audience looks at it like that. But the composer needs somebody to translate his music, even if it's himself. But this is the score, the music score, and somebody has to play it. And it's inevitable that this person doesn't give himself to the music. And so the music sometimes changes a little bit. And that's what the beauty of music is, that it always changes. Mona Lisa doesn't change. The Last Supper doesn't change. But Beethoven's symphonies change millions of times.
Yeah. You said something very interesting. You said that it's inevitable that an interpreter gives something of himself or herself when he's playing it by a composer. So being that true, what part of yourself would like that the interpreter would take from your writing? So you said the interpreter gives something.
Yeah.
What do you give?
Well, simple. I just give the notes, nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
I must say, I give too little sometimes. But I like the liberty of the interpreters, of the musician. And that's why I told them there is no definite performance, because every performance changes, and that they know better than me the music, because they can see it from their point of view. So that's it. That's why certain kind of music that survives until now, the symphonies of Beethoven, of Mozart, and everything, is amazing, because they have changed so much, and so many times, and they still survive. It's because the essence of that music is so great that people for now, three centuries, still can get the essence of the music. The loudness, the tempo, whatever of those music changes all the time. Even the notes, because during Mozart's time, the note A, La, is not this, it's this. So Mozart's sonata at his time sounds like,
which is different.
Yes.
This is very interesting, because people who have the perfect pitch,
Exactly.
for them it's a completely different world.
Exactly.
You change, it's not the same A as A flat.
Exactly. Yes. And it also influenced the mood of the music. I mean, now every music sounds brighter because it's higher. And that's why it's also about the technique of playing. Sometimes I'm amazed that my music can be played so well after a few years. You know, I know some musicians who play my music all the time, and after a few years they play it to me again, and it sounds different. It sounds better. So,
how do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
it would be surprising, but I would like not performing anymore. I would like to write the music I really like. I would work with the musicians I like. I know that many people has been helped by me, or through my foundation, or just by myself. I can see that the children I work with and my team, I have a team in Jakarta, great teachers who work with, specialize with students of instruments. I would like to see them become somebody, not necessarily musicians, but become somebody, and not necessarily rich or famous or whatever, but happy. Yeah, I think.
Not bad. For 2 years, I think.
Yes.
That's not bad.
And I would like to see my city, Jakarta, less polluted and less traffic jam.
Let's see.
But that's not, I can't do anything about it. But what I can do something is the children we are working with now, with my music. And yes.
So thank you, Ananda, for this conversation
Thank you.
and for your hospitality.